Dear fellow system dynamicists, thank you for the honor and privilege to speak to you as the president of the System Dynamics Society. I would like to particularly greet our new members and first-time conference attendees. The first conference is critical for your long-term future in system dynamics. I do hope that in the course of the conference, we can give you ample reason to stay both in the System Dynamics Society and in the field at large. There only is a president to the System Dynamics Society because there is an incredibly large number of people who work very hard to support the mission of the System Dynamics Society. Essentially, the society consists of a small number of employees and a big group of volunteers. Plus, we have loyal sponsors who enable society activities, conference participation, and membership. For that, I'm deeply grateful. All of these people work together to grow the field of system dynamics, to organize conferences, think of initiatives, and support their implementation. As society leaders, our most important job is to make you, our members, happy. In my talk today, I will offer a few reflections on how to do that, on how to make you happy. But first, thank you very much for being part of our very first virtual conference. Going virtual really was a leap of faith, so thank you for jumping in at the deep end with us. Everything is different this year, also the presidential address. While usually presidents get to address their audience in person, I am sitting in my bedroom, which has been serving as my improvised COVID office for months now, and I'm talking to my computer. It takes a lot of visualization effort to imagine you all at the other end of this small black hole that is the camera. Speaking about past presidential addresses, I made the mistake of carefully reading all the available presidential addresses by our past presidents. And they're daunting. They're daunting in their insight and wisdom about how to grow the System Dynamics Society and the field of system dynamics at large. There are some main points that keep reoccurring. Some of them involve do good work and talk about it. Help people do good work and talk about it. So strengthen connections to application domains and related fields. Strengthen presence in media. Strengthen evidence base. Provide learning resources. Provide networking opportunities. Provide mentoring initiatives. Now, when you look at the list of past presidents, it's no wonder that these addresses contain all that wisdom and insight. Look at all these brilliant people who put forward these ideas. So quite naturally, I started to freak out when I started thinking about what I had to offer to the challenge of coming up with a presidential address. But eventually the eternal optimist in me started to wake up, and I went hunting for opportunities in this challenge. So here is my magic potion, aka my presidential address. The ingredients to my address are diverse. Some of them are internal ingredients, some of them are external. For example, I've been working on resilience for a number of years now. Resilience is all about the capacity of systems to cope with challenges. And this is pretty convenient because the System Dynamics Society is facing a range of challenges. So these challenges are my external ingredients. The challenges that the System Dynamics Society faces and the resilience-related question of what we can do to help systems cope with change inspired the title of my talk, Crisis as Opportunities. So my plan for today is that I want to explore how my work on resilience and my work for the System Dynamics Society go together. Is there anything that resilience research can teach us? Is there anything that we can learn? Or how can resilience research help us leverage challenges and crises as opportunities? So let's start with the definition of resilience. Resilience is the capacity of a system to absorb or withstand disturbances, such that the system remains within the same regime, essentially maintaining its structure and functions. Resilience describes the degree to which the system is capable of self-organization, of learning, and of adaptation. Now, you might wonder why I'm showing a definition that refers to social ecological systems, such as food systems or other resource-based systems. In fact, I did have a look at the organizational resilience literature, but I had to recognize soon enough that I don't know that body of literature well enough. But I also realized that even though this body of literature refers to social ecological systems, it lends itself very well for an analysis of the system dynamic society. So resilience essentially is about the delivery of functions in the face of disturbances. And disturbances can be either short-term shocks or long-term stressors. So it's all about how a system delivers functions and how it delivers functions in the face of disturbances. There are three fundamentally different ways in which a system and the way in which it delivers functions reacts to disturbances. The first fundamental behavior mode is stability. In this case, after the occurrence of a disturbance, the system does not exhibit changes in the behavior of the indicator that measures the outcome function. In the case of adaptation, the behavior of the system bends when it is affected by a disturbance, but eventually it bounces back. The third fundamental response mode to disturbance is transformation. In this case, the system as it currently exists not just bends, but it breaks and changes into a new system with a different structure, with different relationships, and different identity. Transformation is not necessarily bad, and I will come back to that very soon. But transformation does imply that we move to a different system. So what are disturbances that are relevant for the system dynamic society? I said that disturbances can be either short-term shocks or long-term stressors. I will get back to long-term stressors in a minute. But a very good example of a short-term shock is the COVID-19 crisis. The COVID-19 crisis forced us to plan for a virtual conference rather than to have the originally planned in-person conference in Bergen. Now let's have a look at what this shock did to us. The graph here shows historical data for conference registrations. The number of conference participants, as you can see in the past, has gone up and down. But when we started planning for the in-person conference in Bergen, we were confident that we would be able to attract 450 people. Come March and early April this year, and we had to make the painful decision of cancelling the in-person conference and going fully virtual. Crunching the numbers gave us a new target. With 350 participants, we would break even. Now fast forward to mid-July. We now have close to 600 registered and paid participants, a number that has never been recorded before. So we did seem to have done something right. And this shock really seems to have transformed into an opportunity. So let's go back to this graph with the three fundamental behavior patterns as a reaction to disturbances. In the case of the conference, the 2020 System Dynamics Conference, stability was not an option anymore. Adaptation was an option. We could have postponed the conference to December, and we were seriously discussing that. We could have moved it to another location and hoped for the best. But instead, we went for transformation. The conference, as we know it, collapsed and transformed into a new operation. And this new operation triggered a lot of innovations. We now have a digital conference and a digital summer school with more participants than ever. We do not have the possibility to meet physically. We cannot roam the conference hotel. We cannot explore the beautiful city of Bergen, and also we cannot take a trip through Norway. However, we are still offering the same events and the same activities that you're used to from previous conferences. And in addition, we have a virtual 3D environment where we can get to know each other in different ways, in new ways and in exciting ways. This digital conference provides massive opportunities for now and for the future. So for example, we are reaching more participants and new participants. So we're expanding our reach. And we're doing that by reducing the carbon footprint. So it was possible to turn this crisis into an opportunity. It was also hard, it was painful. It was only possible because a huge number of people put in an enormous amount of effort to make this happen. The staff and the volunteers went well beyond the call of duty to turn this crisis into an opportunity. But embracing the challenge of going for a fully virtual conference with lots of new elements is a great example for how accepting change can enable opportunities. The COVID-19 crisis is a very timely example of a short-term shock. And we did quite well in that regard, I dare say. But what about long-term stressors and other potential short-term shocks? Are we able to cope with change and turn every challenge into a wonderful opportunity? Let's have a look at longer-term stressors. One such longer-term stressor, and here I found a beautifully catchy title on the web, is the changing landscape in which associations have to navigate. Associations such as the System Dynamics Society. And this operating landscape is changing rapidly. Let's pick just one of these changes, namely the widening gap in perspectives between generations. The rapid evolution of our world over the past decades has created a situation where our eldest members were born into a world that our youngest members do not relate to in any possible way. It is thus important to create an organization that younger people want to join and engage with in sometimes new ways, while also retaining and certainly not alienating existing members. As with most associations, it is probably fair to say that the products, events, publications, services, communications, and decision-makings in our society are more geared towards our existing members than towards our new members. Appealing to younger generations, appealing to our new members, however, does require an innovative and proactive culture. So let's see how we're doing in that regard. Here is some data that helps us think about how well we're doing over a longer time period in terms of navigating the changing association landscape. The data here includes behavior over time for members of the System Dynamics Society and number of participants to our conferences. I am showing these numbers because they help us understand the extent to which we are able to provide value to our members. The Society provides value by being an outlet for much of our work. It also provides value by improving that work, by allowing us as individuals to build upon a body of knowledge. The Society offers a venue for constructive peer criticism, and it provides the hub of a network that keeps system dynamicists in contact with one another. Now, looking at the data of members and conference participants, we don't really see a lot of growth happening these days. The last couple of years have, in that regard, not been the best. Growth stopped some 10 years ago, and our finances started looking a tad frightening. So all in all, we do seem to be struggling when it comes to adapting to and coping with the changing landscape of our very own association. But I must also say, and I cannot say this enough, great things are happening. I had to stop counting how many people, many of whom previously unknown to me, offered to help the Society last year when one negative event after the other occurred. And Rebecca Niles has been doing magic in the short time she has been our executive director. So let's see what else we can do. And let's see how resilience research can help us in that quest. In order to do that, I'm going to build upon the 7 principles for building resilience in social ecological systems. These 7 principles include fostering systems thinking, managing connectivity, encouraging learning, promoting governance, broadening participation, managing slow variables, and maintaining diversity and redundancy. The problem, of course, with these 7 principles is that they're interrelated. That shouldn't come as a surprise to systems thinkers. I will thus not go through them one by one, but group them together. There will still be interconnections between the groups, but we will have to live with this manifestation of complexity. For each of the clusters that I will be discussing, I will start with describing what is meant by the principle, and then reflect on how we, the society, already do in this regard, and finally, what more we will have to do to fully harness the resilience principle. So let's start with the most obvious principles. Let's start with fostering systems thinking and encouraging learning. Let's see how we fare in terms of these principles. Well, first of all, that's pretty much our mission. Fostering system thinking and encouraging learning is ingrained in our mission statement. And so we already see quite a lot going on in this regard. On our webpage, you will find a collection of books, games, videos, learning resources, a member directory, and different mentoring and initiatives. We organize conferences. There is an annual System Dynamics conference with what is by now the 7th summer school. There are Asia-Pacific conferences in regular intervals. And there is work by the chapters and special interest groups that multiply the efforts of the System Dynamics Society. With the onset of the COVID-19 crisis, we created a resource page that makes our models and their documentation accessible. This facilitates exchange, learning from each other, and continuous improvement of these very models. So we already do quite a lot, but more is needed, and we hear that over and over again, both from our current members and especially from our previous members who decided against renewing their membership because they did not find the competence development support they had been looking for. We have a very large self-taught community, and having been part of that community myself, I know firsthand how important it is to make more learning resources available and experimenting with diverse formats of providing learning opportunities. How important it is to connect learners to experts and to connect learners among each other. And how important it is to document and disseminate successful applications of system dynamics. Now, especially in this last domain, in marketing and communication, the last month have been pretty miraculous. Great things are happening there, and there's lots of energy going on. Let me thus focus on learning resources and discussion and exchange. We are already planning a number of activities to expand efforts in these domains. We're discussing whether we should complement the summer school with the winter school. We're planning for a webinar series that will start right after the conference. We're planning on finding, co-marketing, and later maybe developing new games. And most of all, we're working on collecting and curating learning resources and organizing them into a competence development framework. We have started taking baby steps in this direction, and after the conference, for me the magical time period, we will scale up our efforts in that regard. Now, there is a fine line to walk between the ambition of reaching as many people as possible with our educational outreach and ensuring quality. There is also a fine line to walk between requiring the hard work that is needed to progress in system dynamics competence, while at the same time ensuring a learning environment that allows for safe failure and for learning from inevitable mistakes. Because that latter point is really crucial when it comes to encouraging learning. Encouraging learning is not just about providing learning resources and networks. Encouraging learning is also about establishing a suitable social context for the sharing of knowledge and a context in which we can make mistakes, iterate, and slowly get better. Fostering system dynamics competence and encouraging learning is a non-trivial and definitely a contentious issue, but it is one that we need to face. And while the task is challenging, we also have a little bit of data at hand that can help us in this quest. Here, I'm showing results from a recent survey administered by the student chapter. The survey collected data about system dynamics skills that respondents already have, those that they lack but would like to have, and preferences for developing these skills. The graph on this slide here shows the results of a question that probed for the preferred method to acquire system dynamics skills. And you will see that some of the preferred methods clearly ask for face-to-face situations, and that also clearly is necessary. The majority, however, is about online activities. That is all the red bars where I wrote the learning method in italics. Now, the COVID-19 crisis forced us to go online anyway. At the society, we had to find digital solutions for pretty much everything. And those of us teaching at universities had to experiment with a wide range of digital teaching formats anyway. So let's use this to our advantage. We have all it takes. Plus, we have amazing volunteers. In the same survey by the student chapter, we learned that 75% of the respondents were interested in volunteering for the society in the development of such learning content. I must say our volunteers really are an invaluable resource. They have expertise, passion, and ideas. So we seem to have all that it takes to effectively promote system dynamics competence. I would, however, argue that we need to work more on making sure that learners feel safe and supported on their journey. And we need to continuously learn ourselves. We need to be open to doing things in a way that we haven't done them before. There are new learning and dissemination formats out there. Some of them might work for us, some of them might fail. Failing, however, is no crisis. It helps us become more adaptive. And being more adaptive will help us to recover more quickly after a next disturbance. So this call for being open to doing things differently and doing different things brings me to the next set of resilience principles. To the set of maintaining diversity, managing connectivity, promoting governance, and broadening participation. Now, what do all these principles mean? Connectivity is about increasing connections between different social groups and thus bringing in outside perspectives and new ideas. Diversity and redundancy is about offering different and partly overlapping perspectives on an issue which can improve problem solving and support learning and innovation. And finally, participation and governance is about expanding the depth and diversity of knowledge by involving a broad range of stakeholders. And this, in turn, helps detect and interpret disturbances. So let's see how we're doing in terms of these principles. Let's start with connectivity, that is, with the connections between different social groups and how this can bring in outside perspectives and new ideas. Connectivity is also about how we, as system dynamicists, can bring in and outside perspectives and new ideas to application domains. So what is it that we already do? And what more do we need to do? We already do, but I would argue that we can do more. We already publish system dynamics works in non-system dynamics journals, and this is really important. We already have a system dynamics presence at non-system dynamics conferences, but I would argue equally well here that we need to do more. And we also have system dynamics work broadcast in social media and in media. Here are two examples, by far not exhaustive or exclusive to what is being published to the general public. I'm really adamant in saying that we're already doing this, but more is needed because building bridges to other fields and especially to application domains is incredibly important. It is important because studies show that in the absence of such connections, that is, in case of too much inward focus, norms become too homogeneous. And this can lead to a situation where we feel that we're doing well, while we're actually losing the possibility to have the impact that we all so much want to have. For sure, with an inward focus, exploration and innovation capacity decline rapidly. So what can we do to strengthen our presence in non-system dynamics journals, at non-system dynamics conferences, and in the media? Well, we actually know that. We need to talk more about solutions and less about system dynamics. And I'm not the first to say that. It's a cross-cutting theme through past presidential addresses, and it's also been mentioned several times in J. Forrester Award lectures. Now let's turn to diversity. In the last couple of years, there has been tentative progress in diversifying our membership when it comes to geography. North America and Europe still make up the bulk of our members, but the relative share is decreasing. At the same time, the Asia-Pacific region is growing quite rapidly, and we also see an increase in membership in Latin America. So that's good. But more is needed. And I'm sorry to say that. The Society was founded in 1983. We're now writing the year 2020, and I'm a little sad to acknowledge that I'm the very first female president of the System Dynamics Society. I will thus jump to the bold conclusion that we're not quite done when it comes to embracing and nurturing diversity. But this is not about me being the first female president. Diversity is not just about gender, race, and geography. It's about much more. So what kind of other diversity is there? Here, I'm showing some data from unhappy people, from previous members of the System Dynamics Society who decided not to renew their membership. Some of the exit reasons are fair enough. For example, former members are no longer using System Dynamics in their work. But some exit reasons raise serious concerns about the way in which we embrace diversity. For example, consultants and practitioners don't feel very welcome. And also there is a perceived narrow definition of what system dynamics is and what system dynamics should do and shouldn't do. Let's look into the issue of diversity and approaches a little more. The field of system dynamics has evolved and diversified over the last decades. Different objectives are pursued with modeling. Different data collection and analysis methods are applied. Different aspects are emphasized depending on the underlying social theory paradigm. No wonder there is no one way of doing system dynamics anymore. I would also say we will never find a common definition of system dynamics and of what should be considered as system dynamics and what shouldn't, or what defines high quality and what doesn't. But should this stop us? Let me try to use an analogy. I am, as many of you know, Swiss, and I'm a proud Swiss. Switzerland is famous for its great chocolate. So that begs the question, what is Swiss chocolate? These are two photographs that I took from nearby grocery stores. There is a huge selection of chocolate, even in the smallest grocery store. So at the end of the day, we have to acknowledge there is no such thing as the Swiss chocolate. The whole diversity of flavors in these pictures is Swiss chocolate. All of these bars are of high quality. Some flavors I love. Some I find really hard to relate to. For example, bitter orange with raisins. This is, however, other people's absolute favorite. And it is most definitely Swiss chocolate. As in the case for Swiss chocolate, we will never find a definition for system dynamics that everybody agrees with. But that's okay. Let's embrace diversity. We will reach more people and have higher impact. Let's have a look at the last remaining principle for fostering resilience, which is the management of slow variables and feedback. I will introduce this principle with an example. The example here is a freshwater lake with two different regimes. The upper panel shows a vegetation-dominated clear state, and the lower panel shows a turbid state with dramatically reduced biodiversity and water quality. The reason for the regime shift between the clear state and the turbid state is that increasing agriculture in the surrounding area results in phosphorus and nitrogen levels in the water, and these levels in the water, they're the slow variables, that eventually exceed the absorptive capacity of the plants. Excess nutrients in the water now lead to growth of free-floating algae, and this in turn reduces light penetration and gradually leads to the death of the rooted vegetation. Why am I saying all of this? I am concerned that a similar thing could happen with the slow variable that I'll call staff and volunteer energy resources. There's always much more than we could do. Just think about all those grand ideas, not just for growing the field, but also for making it more resilient. We have a wonderful executive director, and we have a treasure chest of members and volunteers. But let's not exhaust our energy resources by expecting perfection in the first attempt. Let's empower them. Let's give them the freedom to experiment with new things and with doing things in a new way. I don't want our staff and volunteers to collapse. I want us to take care of them. I want us to keep them happy. So where does all of this leave us? I started this talk by asking the question whether crises can be seen as opportunities. And obviously my answer to this is a resounding yes. There are some recurrent themes across the principles for building resilience that help us understand why I do think that crises can be seen as opportunities. Many of these recurrent themes have been described before in previous presidential addresses. This includes, but is not limited to, doing good work and talking about it, and to helping people do good work and talking about it. What the resilience perspective added to these insights are principles about how to cope with shocks and stressors on the growth path that we all desire. The most important of these principles are to encourage learning, both in the progression of system dynamic skills, but also as a community of practice. To embrace diversity, both in terms of stakeholders and in terms of approaches. And to be mindful of our limited resources. We need to continuously push the boundaries. Some things will work and unlock opportunities. Others will not work. That's fine. But if we do that, and if we do that consistently, we build a culture of continued innovation, and we are ready for any next crisis that might hit. Now, you might very well disagree with me about my choice of answers to the question whether crises are opportunities for us as a society and for us as a field. And you might certainly disagree with my take on how to become more resilient and thus build our capacity to cope with change. But this is not a catastrophe. Much rather, disagreement is a key feature of resilience. Resilience is very much about something that needs to be negotiated. It is thus crucial that you contribute to the discussion. Become a volunteer. Become a member and make your colleagues join. Do participate in our conferences and make your colleagues join. Put your name forward to the Policy Council, for one of the standing or ad hoc committees. Form a special interest group. Form a chapter. Propose events. Disagreeing with me is not a catastrophe. Remember, one of the key principles of building resilience is to maintain diversity and redundancy. So again, it is very important that you contribute to the discussion. This is your society. System dynamics is your profession. Let's do this together. Thank you very much for being part of our first virtual conference. And thank you for listening.